Time for Changing Australia now, and some famous names, Marilyn Monroe, Ed Sheeran, King George and Joe Biden, are all public figures who had a stutter. There are thousands of others like them around Australia, many facing the challenges of social stigma. In his decades-long career, Professor Mark Onslow has become a leader in the treatment of stuttering. He's the founder and director of the Australian Stuttering Research Centre at the University of Technology in Sydney. And Professor Mark Onslow is my guest today on Changing Australia. Mark, welcome to Radio National Breakfast.
Good morning.
How much has our understanding of why some people stutter, how has that changed over the past few decades?
It's changed a great deal. In the middle of the last decade, it was thought that parents were the cause of it. It was thought that parents became anxious about their children's speech, and that anxiety transmitted to the kids, and that made them stutter. But this century we know that that's all wrong, and it's a physical issue. It's a physical problem that begins when you're younger than 3 years.
Have scans been done when people are speaking to see how the brain lights up when stuttering is occurring?
Yes, there have. And it's not a simple matter because speech is an extraordinarily complicated network of neurological connections. And the way stuttering occurs is that those networks just go slightly wrong. A neurologist can't look at a brain scan and say, oh, that's someone who stutters. They have a really subtle misfunction there.
How much does stigma and people's nervousness and anxiety around stuttering, how does that all fit together, Mark?
People who stutter live in a society that unfortunately marginalises them with negative stereotypes, and that leads and feeds into a lot of social anxiety that adults who stutter experience in daily life. The average person who stutters, who comes to our clinic, will have a 16 times greater chance of having social anxiety disorder than anyone else.
What sort of stories do people tell you, patients that you've dealt with, about the hacks, the shortcuts that they have to try to hide a stutter in some social situations or at work?
That's interesting you should say that, because the adults who come to our clinic quite often will try to hide it, just like you said, but that is the worst thing you can do. With adults who stutter and come to us for help, we find the best way for them to live with it, and hiding it is certainly not on the agenda. The best thing is to get children when they're very young. As soon as stuttering begins, that's when you have the best chance of a favourable outcome. And you're looking, if you treat a little kid who stutters, you're looking at the likelihood that you'll be able to achieve long-term clinical control of the issue, and you won't have to face, a little kid growing up won't have to face those issues.
Is it ever something that kids just grow out of without intervention?
It is. We know that it begins when you're younger than 3, and we know that by 12 years of age, 2/3 of kids will have recovered. But there's 2 issues there. The first is that we don't know which kids are going to recover and which kids aren't. And the second is, if you get to 12 years old and you're still stuttering, you have a 24% chance of having social anxiety disorder, social phobia, and that is a real problem.
So what works? What does the evidence tell us, Mark?
The evidence says that if you are a young child, a simple behavioural treatment that you teach the parents works pretty well. It's called the Lidcombe program.
How does that work?
As children are talking, parents just praise kids when they don't stutter, and every now and then, when the child stutters, the parent will ask them to repeat what has been said without the stuttering, and kids can do that, and if that happens for a month or 2, maybe 3 months, somehow that reorganises the speech networks in the brain. The brain of a little kid is really plastic. It's called neuroplasticity. And you can organise those complicated networks around speech pretty easy when you're very little, but if you get to be in school, it's a different matter altogether, and you're looking at finding a way of dealing with it for the rest of your life.
It sounds ridiculously simple, Mark.
Yeah, yes, it is ridiculously simple, and but the important thing is that this treatment has to be tailored individually for each child and family. Every child and family is different. If you're saying that you're going to appraise a child for not stuttering, every child wants to have that happen in a different way. So unfortunately, you can't just read about it. You need a speech pathologist to guide you through it.
Is it part of a wider multidisciplinary approach that fits into that?
When a kid is little, speech pathologists can handle the issue completely. But many adults who come to us have a lot of anxiety, and then speech pathologists can manage basic anxiety. But our clinical psychologists at the Australian Stuttering Research Centre have developed a website that is really effective for treating the anxiety of adults who stutter. It seems to be nearly as good as seeing a clinical psychologist.
What role can music play, if at all, in dealing with stuttering?
Not much. You're probably going to say that people, when they stutter, if they start singing, they stop stuttering. And that's perfectly true. And unfortunately, when people stop singing and start talking again, they start stuttering. And that may sound really odd, but it happens every time, and it happens for two reasons. One is that when you're singing, your speech mechanism is working much slower and much simpler. And secondly, when you're singing, you know what the words are. But when you're having a conversation, you don't know what's going to come next. I have no idea what I'm going to say next in this conversation.
It sounds like with the kids who are dealing with this, Mark, that parents are hugely important. What sort of effect can it have in a negative sense if parents are not supportive, if they're impatient, if they're putting kids down for stuttering?
Just terrible. It's absolutely the worst thing that parents can do. And that's why we like to get parents and kids into a clinic really quickly so that we can look for any signs that the parent is inadvertently making the child anxious, because stuttering appears sometimes really quickly, and it can be really scary for parents. 1/3 of cases begin overnight, believe it or not, and quite often parents are really upset and distressed about this, as you'd expect. And it's really easy for them to transmit that anxiety to the kids. So the first job of a speech pathologist is to make sure that the child does receive supportive messages from the parent. But you're exactly right. You can't have parents sending negative messages about speech.
What sort of effect does it have when another person, whether it's a parent or a stranger or a work colleague, thinks that they might be helping by finishing someone's sentences?
Well, that's going to drive anyone mad. But if you stutter, it's beyond that. It's probably, there's even been research to show that that is the worst thing to do, to actually finish a sentence for someone who stutters. The best advice is just treat them like anyone else and just wait and maintain eye contact. Chill out.
We know that in some parts of Australia, particularly regional Australia, the wait time for adults or kids to see a speech pathologist can be very long. How important is it to try and improve that accessibility and the resources there for people who are desperate for help?
It's critical. There just aren't enough speech pathologists in Australia to deal with all the kids and adults who are stuttering. And in some countries it's far worse. For example, in India there's one speech pathologist for every 600,000 people.
Wow.
So, but in Australia, we still don't have enough speech pathologists. So one of the core research programs that we're engaged in at the University of Technology, Sydney, is to develop online AI-driven treatments for stuttering, and we've started to publish some encouraging results.
Well, Mark, it's been fascinating to talk to you. And I must ask you from a personal perspective, do you find that people say that they're nervous speaking with you about stuttering, that they're not looking to trip over their own words?
I hope not. Yeah. If I made anyone anxious talking to me, I'd be pretty upset about that.
Yeah, it's an interesting area, a fascinating area. Mark, thank you very much for joining me.
You're welcome.
Professor Mark Onslow is a speech pathologist and the director of the Australian Stuttering Research Centre. As you heard Mark saying, desperate need for more resources in this area to help the kids, young people and adults who are dealing with stuttering.